Hi Jordan and Keith. Thank you for making this interview during the European tour in Vienna.
You're welcome. Thank you for
How
doing
are you
it.
and how goes the current European tour?
Everything is going very well. We're closing up our tour. We have what, 3 more shows?
3 more shows,
to do?
including tonight.
Yes. So we have Vienna, and then we have 2 shows in Romania, and then we'll be going home.
Great. So you are best known for keyboards and synthesizers, and you are very involved in different companies. To be very fundamental, what has you moved to buy your first synthesizer, and when do you buy it?
My first synthesizer, well, my first electronic keyboard was a Panther organ. I don't know, remember this?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it was a red Panther organ, double manual. I don't know, somehow the Farfisa thing didn't come into my life, but Panther did. But then after that, my next synthesizer was a Mini Moog.
So do you buy it due of the sound possibilities, or do you want to discover something completely different?
I had heard Patrick Moraz play in the Refugee album, and I heard Rick Wakeman use it on like Six Wives of Henry VIII, which was one of his solo albums, and I knew that I had to have one.
So you was influenced by other bands who already used synthesizers on stage?
Yes, sure. Well, I mean, I was a classical music student going to Juilliard and only knew really about pianos mostly. And then one day a friend of mine came into my house and played the Emerson, Lake and Palmer Tarkus album, and it pretty much blew my mind, and I had to listen to it over and over again because I was like, oh my God, the keyboards have so much power. Like, what's going on here? This is possible? So it was really an awakening.
At the moment there is a kind of resonance of these old synthesizers. Some famous companies like Behringer will clone older vintage synthesizers. Right. What do you think about what is so great on vintage stuff compared to new synthesizers?
Yeah. Well, personally, I think it's very nice that they're making all these clones and kind of visiting a lot of that stuff, but having kind of grown up with a lot of it, it's not my biggest interest. I'm more interested in like things that are forward thinking, that are cutting edge, that are pushing the envelope, that allow you to make sounds that you haven't heard before. But I can understand that maybe people who've never experienced like the older stuff would want to.
One of the things I like about the new clones is a lot of times you'll have MIDI or modern ability to address their unique character, so you can add them as a layer to one of the new things, right, or one of Jordan's apps or something like that. So
that's true. It'll be more accessible.
It's
or
more
it'll have
accessible
effects built
on
in.
the iPad to have a Mini Moog.
Yes,
or something
that's
like
awesome.
Like
yeah,
that is amazing.
Right.
So do you prefer to combining more old stuff with new stuff?
Well, yes. I mean, I'll do that. If I'm just sitting in front of my computer, I will use like the older, instead of having to walk around the room and like, use my, MIDI synthesizers that are everywhere scattered around the room. I might call up the virtual, version of that and use that and mix it in a track for sure.
So you prefer so the vintage is warmer. Is it for you warmer and bigger, the sounds from old, or is it quite the same as the synthesizers from today?
Well, I'm not really so much of a purist like that. I mean, I feel like I can make all kinds of sounds with like digital equipment and get it to be amazing. But when you are playing like a classic Mini Moog or something like that, there is something to the tone that you say, oh yeah, right, okay, I get it.
I think that question opened up the Pandora's box of, look, everything is just another tool in the toolbox. And I think to us, it doesn't matter which hammer you pick up. If you need a hammer, there's lots of different kinds of hammers, and a lot of them will get you there. And we're careful about which one we use when, but based on motion and gut feeling.
So you have your old gear which you bought for the first time, the first instrument. You have it on your studio?
Fortunately, I don't. I have right now. I have three mini Moogs, but none of them are my original one, which is very sad. I think 2 of them are Voyagers, and one of them is called a Classic something or other. Yeah, I really want the new one. I want my original one back. It's a long story. We don't have to get into it. but I like the one that they're making now. That's more like the original.
So we talked now about some older stuff. Are there also some new synthesizers you will interested, or do you draw your interest in the last NAMM show maybe, or in the last two NAMM shows?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things. I'm mostly interested in synthesizers that have like the MPE kind of capability, because I like using things like my Continuum or my Seaboard or my own applications. My Wisdom Music's new synthesizer, GeoShred, is a physically modeled synthesizer, and so it responds to MPE, and that's the kind of thing that I like. A lot of people are using Equator now, which was made by Roli, and which works very nicely for the independent touches, and that's certainly a good one. Can you think of any other ones that are rocking our boat right now?
Everything that touches on that area is what we're interested in now, because for us that's the cutting edge of multi-touch and the MPE, all the new capabilities of it. Yeah.
I'm sure one of our watchers are maybe some amateurs or very beginners. Imagine you are now a synthesizer teacher. What give you some advice to the students or to newcomers how to begin or how to start with synthesizers?
That's a very good question. So when I started with the synthesizer, I knew nothing technically at all. I had no idea. On my Mini Moog, I had no idea what the little words meant under the knobs. All I knew is that if I moved one knob and I moved that wheel at the same time, it would create this sound. So it was a very, very organic kind of an experience, and I wouldn't trade that in for anything.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of knobs that did nothing until you figured out, oh, you had to have that other knob up or something like that. So,
And we finally got to a point with synthesis that the screens, we got into digital, and the screens became very small. So I remember my first digital synthesizer came at a time when I was still figuring out what some of the words meant, and I was basically screwed because it was a 2-character display, and the only way to know it was to know what everything was. But I had actually gotten a job many years ago. We're talking, like 30 years ago, with Korg as a product specialist. And doing that job, I slowly but surely kind of learned what a lot of those words meant. I still try to ignore what a lot of them mean, and I'll ask Keith or somebody what they do. But I learned enough to be slightly dangerous in that world.
Perfect.
So it's a balance of technical and...
But would you recommend people even start on iPad, on iPhone, or?
At this point, you have so many different kinds of synthesizers that are out there, so many vintage clones. It's kind of nice, the idea of somebody getting something where they could learn it organically.
Well, clearly anybody who already owns an iPad, it's going to be the cheapest to just get apps and figure out the knobs from there. So you got to allow for that as well. If you're talking about a very very beginner, you can't deny that the app way, if you already own the hardware, the app is going to be the cheapest way to get into it. Well, I wish we had the access.
Well,
to that
because
when I was starting, but I wouldn't trade the way I learned either for the world, because of course it was all if Mini Moog, then the Poly Moog, then the Memory Moog. Then I had access to Keith Emerson's big modular Moog and was learning the patch cable side of how how crazy you can get yourself into trouble.
Well, I'll just add very quickly, but with the iPad, it is amazing that you have every option, because you can play with like music apps that are quite sophisticated, that all they are is an organic way to reach in and touch the sound and do cool things. You can also go into ones that are more technical. I think, also what's happening today is that you've got all these music schools that are great for teaching synthesis and teaching audio and production. We didn't have that when I was growing up, when Keith was growing up.
So there is nothing like actually touching a hardware synth and making sounds out of it. So that you have to have that as a goal. If you're going to get into synthesis, don't just stop at apps, because the immediate gratification of turning a knob and changing the sound is, I'm sure, why so many people are into it.
So for you, it's still an other dimension to turning a knob or to turning the knob with the mouse?
I also, as a person who enjoys the tactile part of playing an instrument. To me, the ultimate instrument is one that offers me some, the best kind of feeling about it. So, yes, a really nice fader or a knob or a really good keyboard, things like that matter to me. That's why I'm not so much into the concept of doing things totally just in the air. I want to feel something. So that's kind of what we're talking about to the highest level of musical instrument. That's the problem I have with the apps, even my own apps. I think they're like incredible what you can do on it, and I view like my GeoShred as a really great musical instrument. But if I look away, if I'm looking over there and playing it, I'm lost. So there's something missing there, and it's all about like what you can feel. But that's everybody's problem at this point. It's not,
right. And let me just explain that means that when you're touching glass and you look away, of course, there's no reference point like there is on a regular keyboard to know where you are on the glass if you get just shifted off by a small amount. Whereas on a keyboard, you quickly find where the black keys and where the white keys are.
So the highest level of these new expressive, interesting, cutting edge instruments, the ones we're looking for are ones that incorporate a tactile kind of sensibility, visual information, and also allow for this multidimensional expressive control.
If we check now your gear on the stage, you use the Korg KRONOS since years already, and now you have already a new one. Is there a reason beside your partnership of Korg? Why do you use this?
This is the big reason, because the Korg Cronus is an extremely solid music making machine that allows me to play thousands of shows without any problem at all. But it's been it has been incredibly reliable for us. Much more reliable than if we're using any kind of computer, We do use a computer, and it's not as reliable as the Korg Cronus. And also the workstations, Korg workstations, have come so far now where I can program these very, very advanced sounds with, let's say, 16 layers or splits. And while I'm holding down something very complicated, maybe a sound effect, a French horn, a voice, a flute, and it's all held down, I can switch the sound and nothing gets interrupted. And then I can be playing a really distorted organ sound with a big reverb on my strings. So it's extremely smooth, and we're at a great point in the history of kind of performing on keyboards for that. These hardware instruments like the Kronos are extremely capable. So
when we check your sound, you make the sound design of Dream Theater and also for other projects. How difficult is it to bring the sounds from the studio to the stage?
So in the studio, when I'm working with Dream Theater, I have my computer and I have whatever toys and plugins that I want to use, and whatever other keyboards I want to use too. Part of it is because I like to put my hands on things quickly, and I don't want to wait to say, oh, wait, I'll load in an organ or I'll load in a clavinet. So I'll have keyboards kind of like usually around me where I can get to sounds quickly. But sometimes I'll find something on my computer or whatever that's a special effect that's a little bit different. And then the trick is to be able to bring that to the live stage. And what I'll do is either I can synthesize it or we can sample it. A lot of times what we'll do is, that's a amazing sound, but the only way to get it is to grab it. And we've done that with guitar stuff, even when John, plays something really massive and we want to make sure we have that at the same time he's playing a lead. Occasionally we'll get a sample, we'll put it in the Kronos, and I'll play it with my pinky. So the normal stuff. So if you create some very varied and very special sounds, you sample them and you put it in the Kronos. That's correct.
And concerning sound design, do you have some good advices to beginners how to program own sounds? Some for a great dive in the synthesizer, how they can say, okay, I program now a sound and.
Well, I at this point in our history and with the way things are, I really recommend that people go for some training with, for synthesis, because there's so many places to do that. You can learn online. Mac Pro Video has, or Ask Audio. There's a great company even that has fantastic courses on, different kinds of synthesizers. So there's a lot of information. I feel like people have to, take the time and really learn what's going on. But then it also comes down to your ear and your sensitivity. If you're working with an analog type of an instrument, you can just start to move the knobs and you have to listen and just, be really, careful, sensitive about the kinds of sounds that you're creating.
When that question comes up for me, it's usually somebody who has experience with synthesizers and has gone as kind of as far as they can and feel frustrated in wanting to go further. And in that case, I teach people what I wish someone taught me earlier, which is take every knob and run it farther than you think it should go until you figure out what the sound of that knob is, and that gets you there faster. So go beyond what you think. If you're just trying to make things brighter or more filter or whatever, go too far, and that'll tell you where you like what the safe zone is, and when you've gone too far.
Right. It's like on a mini moog, you turn up the resonance so you could hear where
till
the filter is.
Yeah.
But sometimes the person doesn't even know that they need to turn the resonance up so they can hear more of where the filter is at. So
Great example.
Yeah.
And many users and many musicians use their synthesizer or use effects to improve this, use internal effects or pedals to improve the sound or making different sounds. How do you process? How is your philosophy? Do you use effects or do you...
To me, the effects are just part of the whole. Like the synth, it's all one thing. I don't think of the filters as being any different than my distortion or my reverb. If I have a sound in my head, it's going to involve an entire sonic picture, and it's going to be definitely involving the effects. The Kronos is actually amazing with effects because it has 12 insert effects and what they call total effects. And then it has two other multi-effects processors. So when I'm doing these really cool layers and splits, I can really run things through all the different effects and have them breathe and have their own life. And another thing is that, in my world, in this crazy prog metal world, distortion is king. Yeah. So I need to be very, very conscious of that. And when I'm programming sounds, I'm really super picky about the way the distortion sounds because I have a lot of dirty sounds that have to add character to the guitar or just extend the metal, if you will, to another level. So it's a lot of tweaking with the distortions and, tube effects and whatever the hell else we've got, all kinds of EQs to make sure it is actually on the cool side of the distortion meter instead of, the crappy side.
Just busted up because it was there, not because you wanted to.